Hey everybody, this is Benji Bruce here with SpeakingLifestyle.com, and I got Marshall Sylver on the line. Marshall, are you there?
I am here and excited to be so.
All right, cool. And Marshall Sylver, guys, by the way, if you don't know who he is, I heard about Marshall Sylver from a lady named Amber, and Marshall, you know who she is. And basically, what happened was I was seeing all these speakers, and they were like closing from the stage. They were great. But then I asked her, I said, who's like the best closer you've ever seen? And without thinking, she immediately said, look at this guy named Marshall Sylver. And I was like, what? And so I looked you up and I thought to myself, dang, this guy is good, like on a whole new level type of good. So I appreciate you being here, Marshall. And, and by the way, Marshall is like a top speaker, like multimillionaire speaker, by the way. So just to give you a little background on who this guy is. So thanks for being here. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, I've seen like several speakers, they try to sell from the stage and they try to do their thing, but they're not really as good at it as you are. And in fact, I've seen a speaker who maybe tried to copy you. They tried to copy what you're saying, but they didn't really get the same results. So I want to know, why are you so good at just selling from the stage and just speaking in general?
Well, that's very kind, and I would agree. I've trained a lot of speakers because that is a big portion of what we do. And one of the first things that I teach speakers is the hardest thing for them to actually grasp, and that is for them to not attempt to be me. And I think the biggest challenge that people have if they attempt to emulate somebody else rather than take the skill set the other person is using and then, make it their own, is they come off looking like a bad version of the original. And since the most important element in influence is sincerity, it's a belief in your products, it's a moral and ethical obligation to sell the thing that you're selling, knowing that you are doing people a favor by selling it to them, and also that you are harming them by not closing them. If you start with that kind of a foundational mindset, then it doesn't become, gosh, can I get them to part with their money? Gee, I sure hope I can use as many strategies and techniques as possible to get them to buy from me. You realize it's that moral and ethical obligation, and that ultimately their life will be better because they purchased from you. And I think a lot of people come from a place of insecurity. Their own programming is so poor, their own self-confidence is so lacking, that when they get up on a platform, since every single thought we think has a physical response, when they get on a platform, what happens is they start telegraphing that. They start, showing off those insecurities or that desperation. And people will hear the message. Maybe they'll even like the product. The biggest challenge is, though, they will read the cold read and the body language, and they'll say, I want to buy the product. It seems like it's a good idea. There's just something not quite right, so forget about it. I won't buy this. So I think that by starting with understanding that influence in general is an inner game and not an outer game, not one of technique, not one of strategy, one of absolute ethics, you'll become much more powerful.
Okay, so with the inner game, by the way, you talked about don't like emulate you, and people who don't know you, you're a hypnotist, so it's almost like it's impossible to copy you anyways. But when you talk about just the state of mind, the inner state of mind that a speaker has, what type of state of mind do you have when you're actually speaking? Like, what's going on in your head? Kind of like how they have actors where they say there's that inner script going on. What's kind of going on in your head?
Well, I've been on stage since I was 7 years old, and I have been a professional on stage since I was 10, meaning doing it for money. And the first thing that goes through my mind as I'm about to get on stage is what a great place to be. And there's no fear. There's certainly excitement. There's what other people might call anxiousness. I just call it excitement. And you let that excitement charge you. There's also some other beliefs that would serve speakers well. First belief is the audience loves you already, or they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be in the room. And so if you step on stage with that knowledge that they already love you, you don't have to win them over, then it becomes more relaxed and it becomes much more like a conversation than just somebody talking at someone else. The other thing is to have great sensory acuity. If I know that I'm on stage in front of a group of dentists versus a group of online marketers, or a group of real estate investors versus a group of salespeople for IBM, if I can be empathetic, if I can ask myself the questions, what would they be concerned with? What would their challenges be? Then what happens is I end up taking, a completely different viewpoint and a completely different presentation style.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. As far as like, 'cause you said how you would come out there expecting the audience to be receptive and everything. Well,
I expect them to love me before we even get started. Yes.
So what if you come out? Because I've seen speakers, they come out and maybe they don't have the state of mind, which is why they create this type of environment. But they come out and it's like the audience is immediately closed off to them, and you could just feel it in the room. The audience just doesn't want to buy. So like, what could they do to kind of create the state of mind inside someone else to get them more receptive to buy? Does that make any sense?
I think, yeah, kind of. And I think that the important point to note is that it's never the audience. I've been on stages with other speakers and they'll get on stage and they'll say, oh, the audience sucked, or they're just not a buying crowd. And I think it's very important as a speaker to never, ever, ever blame the audience. I've been on stage in places where everybody else tanked. Nobody was making any money. And everybody said, oh, gosh, there's no money in the room. They're just not buying. And I hold a different belief. Number one, I believe people will find the money when they want something. And if they're not buying, it's just because they don't want what you're selling. And even though that's a hard pill to swallow, I sat a couple of weeks ago with the number one timeshare owner in the world. He owns the largest privately held timeshare company in the world. And his sales staff were talking about that. We were talking about a project, and I was talking about what I was going to sell to his people. And one of his salespeople said, well, we don't want you selling something to our guests because then they won't buy from us. And the owner of the company, the billionaire, he said, if they have enough money to buy from Marshall, they have enough money to buy from us. And if they like what they see, they're going to buy both. And it's that prosperous mentality, the abundance mentality that you've got to start with, and never, ever, ever decide beforehand that audience isn't buying or they can't afford your products. Not expecting an audience to be able to afford or even want your products is an insult. And so, it's a cop-out when people don't make the sale to blame it on the audience. I always look back at me. And for the record, I've never, ever done one presentation I was 100% satisfied with. I've never done a presentation ever in the history of doing presentations that I didn't step off stage and say, I could have done this differently. I could have done that better. I could have changed this or that. So, I think as speakers develop, the things to keep in mind is be empathetic, not sympathetic. Put yourself in the shoes of your customer, of the person in the audience, and ask yourself the question, what challenge do they have that I need to solve? And then the other piece that I really do focus on, that I know makes a big difference, that I don't think a lot of people focus on, is I will, from the moment I get on stage, let the audience know that I'm going to be selling them something. Benji, I will often see speakers get on stage and they'll say, it's all content, just a little bit of, sales on the end, but it's all content. And I'm the opposite. Everything is selling. From the moment I step on stage, I'm selling. And so what happens with that person that has that subconscious resistance to selling things from the platform, or even thinks the audience is going to resist them, is they do their whole presentation, they give a ton of content, and then at the very end of their presentation, they kind of hoodwink people and slip a close in there at the end. Whereas if you'll simply tell the audience, hey, I'm here for 90 minutes, I intend to give you a ton of value, I also have this product for sale, it sells for this much money, although I'm going to give you a massive discount, I just wanted you to know that I'm here to sell you that product, that's my intention, and I know the only way you'll buy from me is for me to be honest about what I'm doing, give you great value here, and if you get great value here for nothing, the question will be, hey, if he gave that much for nothing, how much would he give me if I actually invested in his product? And so the expression that I use is that those that are afraid to buy are always afraid to sell. That when somebody has resistance in their own subconscious mind to being sold things, the moment they go to sell things, they will telegraph that hoodwinkness, I call it, that they believe they're conning people if they get those people to buy. And I think that the one last thing, too, on that note, Benji, is that a lot of people equate audience with popularity. And I don't. I believe that people vote with their wallets. And early on in my speaking career, I got on stage, 1,000 people in the room. I get a standing ovation. I do the sales that I did. And this guy walks up to me and he said, "Oh my gosh, you are the greatest speaker I have ever seen. You are amazing." I said, "Great. I'm glad you invested in my product." He goes, "Oh, I'm not going to buy your product. I just want you to know that you're an amazing speaker." And so I went home that day and I went, well, that really sucked, because people do vote with their wallets. You know, there's a lot of people these days, podcasters and vloggers and people that have big audiences, yet they don't generate any revenue. And the reason is that they're afraid to sell things because they're afraid if they offer something up for sale, they will insult their audience or they'll offend their audience, and then they'll lose a viewer or somebody downloading their podcast. And it's kind of like the people that are afraid to email market their list. They don't want to email market their list too often. I had a couple of guys at my palace in Vegas. I have a 17,000 square foot home in Vegas as my primary residence, and I had two of the top marketers in the world in my living room, and we were chatting about things, and they asked me, how big is your list? And I gave them the number, and they said, how often do you mail to the list? I said, every couple of months. They said, you don't have a list. I said, what do you mean? They said, if you're only mailing every couple of months, you don't have a list. And I said, how often do you mail to your list? And they said, every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And I know this to be true because I'm on their list, and I get emails multiple times a day from these guys. And I said, well, what happens if people opt out? He said, then they weren't your customer. So they're going to opt out. And so it's the same thing. When I get on stage, I'm not concerned about offending people. I'm not concerned that people will say, all you did was try to sell me something. My response will be, of course I did. It's my job. It's good for me. It's good for you. It's good for the entire economy. And I think that when speakers lose that sense of needing to be loved or hoping not to offend anybody and thinking if they can just be kind enough and if they can just give enough content, then they'll close, they'll get to the point where they'll realize that my style and the style that I believe is most effective in human psychology is what I call brutal honesty. Even if you have to ask the audience, would you rather I was honest or gentle? Because if I can be honest, I can change your life. If I can be gentle, we might be friends, except nothing will change. And then when you have that permission to be honest and you have that permission to tell them the truth, then that turning up the pain and offering the pleasure becomes a lot easier.
Well, it's funny you say that because that was actually going to be one of my questions of how do you transition to a close, but you don't ever transition. You just close the whole time. And
yes.
And it's funny because I actually did see your presentation live, and it's like a lot of speakers, I can see the difference in psychology that you have versus other speakers, because before this interview, I asked people, I said, hey, are there any questions you want me to ask this guy? And most of the questions were like, hey, how do we kind of give content but not sell too much and things like that? And you're basically like, hey, they're pretty much one and the same. And
they are one and the same. Yeah, they are absolutely one and the same. And again, it's kind of like you don't have to sell somebody on something that is genuinely good for them. You have to educate them on the fact that it's good for them. If people don't buy, it's not just because they didn't like the speaker, they didn't like the content, they didn't like the offer. One of the biggest reasons people won't invest is themselves. They believe that, yeah, that worked for somebody else, or yeah, their life changed, or yeah, I know you train all the speakers in all the major speaking organizations, which I do, but you know, those guys are with those huge organizations and they've got guaranteed audience. I'm just this little guy, you know, I'm usually in front of 10, 20, 30, 50 people at a time. How in the world could I expect to walk out of that room with 6 or even 7 figures if I'm only in front of 50 or 100 people? And my answer is, again, very simple, that you've got to figure out and understand your audience. And part of understanding your audience is realizing there are people that will be in the audience that you could say, I have $1 million cash. It's here on the stage. All you have to do is stand up, walk forward, put your hand on it, and it's yours. And there are people that won't leave their seat. There are people who just say, oh, he's not going to give me the money. Oh, there's some kind of, catch. It's got to be a scam. And there are some people, no matter what you're selling, they're not buying. They're just not going to buy, so let it go. There are some people that, given good validation, good proof of the reality that what you're offering is worth way more than what you're asking, that will buy from you. On the other hand, there are people that no matter what you're selling, they will buy, which is why I have students that have invested strong six figures with me over the course of their, time learning from me and come back again and again and again and hire me on an annual basis as their consultant. I have speaker clients that pay me six figures a year because in one weekend they make that up with just simple tweaking on their presentation. Part of what I do, Benji, when I'm working with speakers is the first thing is I want to see them speak. I don't work with newbies. I work with people that are over the stage fright stage, and they are at a place where they have a presentation and they say, how do I make this better? That said, there are some core foundational things that can instantly increase a person's ability to close from the platform, and one of them we already talked about. That is that the individual themselves likes to buy things, that the speaker themselves loves that whole process of buying and selling because they're going to telegraph that whether they want to or not. One of the other things, and this is, kind of flies in the face of what most people believe, is early on in my career, I thought if I just gave them tons of content up front, then they'd buy from me. And I have come to learn in a huge way that a lot of people's challenge is not that they didn't give enough content. The challenge is they gave way too much. And they gave so much content in their preview that the audience needed to take that information, go digest it before they would come back and make another purchase. In my preview events, I recommend to people they should have no more than 6 content slides total. Any more content slides than that, and they really need to take a look and see, are they over-delivering on the content and not making clear what their offer is? On the reverse side of that as well, I've seen a lot of people that got up, they had a good presentation, they gave good content, they made their offer, and then almost, once again, in a look of desperation, they threw in this bonus, and this bonus, and this bonus, and this bonus, and this bonus. And by the time they're done, their slide that had one offer on it at, $2,000 now has 50 items. And the audience becomes confused. They start to say, I don't even really know what I'm buying now. At first I was clear, but then you added all these things, and that's a lot of stuff. I don't really want those other bonuses. And gee, if you've got to add all those bonuses, maybe your product isn't that good. And so, by trying too hard, by giving too much value both in the content of the presentation and then in the offer, people can often unsell the person that wanted to buy the product in the first place.
Okay, so I think what a lot of speakers don't kind of get is the selling, because when you're on stage and you're technically selling, it doesn't really sound like you're selling. It doesn't sound like you're like, hey, here's my product, keep buying my product. It doesn't sound like you're doing that. I went to another seminar. This is actually one of the first seminars I've ever been to. It was a Rich Dad Poor Dad seminar, and it was one of those they host everywhere. I went just nonstop selling. To me, it was literally so bad after 30 minutes, I just got up and left. But with you, it's almost like even if they're in a state of mind of like, I'm not going to buy, they're still entertained by you.
Absolutely. And that's, key is that funny means money. And you as an entertainer, and I've seen some clips of your stuff, you're brilliant, your work is amazing and so much fun. If a speaker will start with the premise of what you just described, that the audience member is going to size you up in the first 5 minutes or less. And if in the first few minutes you get on stage and you make them laugh and you make it fun and they go, this is cool, I'm excited to be here, whether he was selling something or not, whether I learned something or not, I can tell that the next 90 minutes of my life are going to be a good time. When people can do that, then you'll have the audience engaged. First thing you want to do is entertain people. You want to capture their attention. Second thing you want to do is you want to educate them. You want to let them know you know your stuff and that you have some valuable information, concepts, strategies, methods that could make their lives in that area easier. And then finally, you want to empower them to make a decision. And one of the ways that you can help empower them to make a decision is what most people skirt around, and that is you talk about the pieces of resistance. You talk about the things that are going through their head before they even start going through their head of all the reasons they wouldn't want to buy your product. I'll give you a case in point. Most people that go to seminars go to lots of seminars. most people that go to lots of seminars have bought books or tapes or even other seminars and either never even opened up the tapes or never even attended the other seminars. So if I'm a speaker and I'm on stage and I know I'm at a multi-speaker event, then I need to address that piece of resistance. Otherwise, they're going to have the piece of resistance, and if I don't overcome it, that's going to be the reason they don't buy my products. Years ago, I was at a real estate speakers program, a real estate promoter, and there was about 1,000 people in the room, and I was selling Turning Point for $2,000, which is what I retail it for. And I'm on stage. It's before lunch. I close, and when I close at lunch, we close 80% of the buying units in the room. 80% of the buying units. So the buying units on 1,000 people was roughly 700. So we do extremely well. I do about 550 sets, over $1 million in sales. I go to lunch with the promoter, and we have a great lunch, and, he knows that he's made $500,000. I've made $500,000 all before lunch. It's a good day. We come back from lunch, and there was somebody walks up to him and whispers something in his ear, and he swears. He drops an F-bomb. He turns to me. He said, "You had 100 cancellations." I said, "What? What the heck?" I said, "What happened when I was gone?" Well, it turns out there was another speaker who's a well-known guy, actually, who got on stage after I was there, and he sold a similar product, except his product that would normally retail for $2,000, he gave for free to people if they bought his $19.95 book.
Mm. Wow.
And so the promoter said, well, that's the last time he'll ever speak at my conference, because the other guy didn't make any money. The other guy's promise was, I'll give my front end event away for free, and then I'll pay you some money on the back end. And the promoter's response after that was, screw that. I just want the money on the front end. I don't care what you do on the back end. I can't keep track of it. I don't care. Well, that didn't solve everything for me. Now that I knew that that was that guy's close, I had to make sure that if I was ever on another multi-speaker event that speaker was on, that I addressed that. So the way I addressed that was very cool. I'd get on stage, I'd do my presentation, and I would directly say, some people offer up their programs in different ways. In fact, there are some people that would allow you to take their initial program totally free, maybe even the price of a book. And while I think that's a great value, and I'm sure that their program is awesome, how many of you would agree you get what you paid for? So all the hands go up, and I said, furthermore, how many of you agree if you'd paid $1 million for this seminar, you'd already be taking better notes? So while I'm not going to offer it up to you for free, I'm going to give you great value, and I'm going to give you a better than money back guarantee. So, when the other speaker came up, they couldn't position it financially in a better way because I'd already positioned the fact that you get what you paid for, so we didn't have any cancellations after that. I remember a few years back, Benji, the FTC changed some ruling that freaked a lot of marketers and speakers out. And the ruling that they changed was that if you offer a testimonial, if you give an example from any of your previous students of their successes, you're required by law to also tell the audience what the average result of the average student that comes through your course is. And so a lot of people were freaking out because they knew what the average result of the average student was, and it wasn't very good. I didn't freak out. I believe that, one of the reasons I close so well from the platform is I just tell the truth. And when people hear the truth, they go, my gosh, I think that's awesome, but he's telling the truth and he's not trying to hide anything. And so right after the law changed, I got on stage, showed a testimonial, and I told the audience, I said, the FTC has recently changed the law. And the law is, because I showed you that testimonial, I'm required to give you the average result of the average student that goes through my courses. So I'm going to do that. In fact, I'll do even better than that. I'm going to give you the average result of the average student that goes through any seminar program. In fact, I'll even give you the average result of the average student that goes through any seminar program or graduates from Yale, Harvard, or Wharton School of Business. The average result is slightly above zero. And the reason the average result is slightly above zero is because there are a few people that are exceptional. In my own life, years ago, I sat in a room just like you're seated in right now, and I watched a speaker offer up a training program for $3,000. I was the first person out of my seat to take him up on the offer. I went to the seminar that he went to. There was only about 25 people in the class, and I've got to tell you, I don't remember any of the names of any of the other students in the class. I promise you, they remember my name. because I took that information and turned it into over $200 million in sales. So the question I have for you, the audience, is are you average or are you exceptional? Because one person in this room, based on what I'm teaching you right now, is going to end up taking this information and they're going to do more with it than anybody else in the room who thinks they're that person. And then the hands go up. So we're able to tell the truth and also, though, use it to our advantage. And I think that that's what a lot of speakers don't do. Again, it's their own lack of self-confidence. It's maybe even a belief that what they're selling is crap, which oftentimes it is. And, I just teach a little bit differently. We have a speaker training program that I do, and I put my money where my mouth is on the program. The investment for the training program is $30,000, and I don't hold anything back. I work with people on their scripts. I show them exactly what they need to do. The way we structure it, though, is that the investment for the course is $5,000 up front, and then the $30,000 is split out of future sales 50-50 until they've paid me the balance of that money. And in that way, if somebody really doesn't do anything, then they invested $5,000 and it's not any skin off my back if they don't go out and do anything. If they do go out and do something, which is what we want them to do, then they'll realize very quickly that they could recoup that additional, $25,000 from future sales. They could recoup that almost instantly just by using what we taught them. And I think just too many people are afraid to put their money where their mouth is and actually say, hey, my results are going to be based on how well I perform, and that's how I like it.
That's actually a very cool way to do it. As a matter of fact, the thing that when people are listening to this, they're going to listen to what it is you're saying, but I kind of want people to listen to more of how you're saying it. And can you kind of talk about how you create stage presence in either in someone else or just your stage presence in general? Can you talk like
stage presence, what most people would call stage presence, I simply call charisma. And charisma is of a sexual nature. Charisma is largely due to being interested versus interesting. It's not about you, it's about the audience. I see a lot of speakers that get on stage and they carry on and on about how awesome they are and all the things they do, and they don't really pay much attention to the audience. And like I said, they don't become empathetic. They don't say, hey, I understand what it feels like to sit where you're seated. I've sat there too. I know how terrifying it is to wonder if the person on stage is attempting to separate you from your money or if they genuinely care about your well-being. And so charisma comes from watching the other people, looking into their eyes and not wandering your eyes around the room, really going from face to face to face. Charisma is being attentive to your hygiene, so that you don't smell bad and your hair is properly cut and your nose hairs are trimmed and that you don't smell bad. And charisma is also understanding your material well enough to clearly communicate to people. A lot of speakers will mumble and they wonder why they're ineffective. And it's because they don't over-enunciate. They don't slow down enough for people to understand what they're saying. And they have no passion themselves. They're just what we call phoning it in. They're not excited about what they're doing. They've been doing it for, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and they're tired and they're just over it and they just want to move on. And my opinion is they should. So how you cultivate charisma, number one, you become interested. You make it about the audience. Number two, you think of yourself kind of like James Bond. You move from one place on the stage to another, and you plant your feet. You have a reason for crossing the stage. You make sure that you are over-enunciating, that you consciously are slowing down your delivery, that you have a constant slight smile on your face, and that you develop what I call dulcet tones, a lower voice, because that lower voice resonates on a subconscious level much better than a higher-pitched voice can.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was actually going to ask you about that. Like, as far as your voice goes, you said like you did radio before? Was that it?
Yeah, I've been on stage since I was 7, and when I was 17, got my first job in radio. I was on a beautiful music station. It was called FM 104 K-Joy, beautiful and relaxing music to have your teeth drilled by. And so I had a chance to early on develop my voice and realize that it was going to be a major asset later on in life. This month, actually, I'm in San Diego right now at my beach house, right on the water in a place called Carlsbad. Later this month, I'm going to head up to Anaheim, and I'll work one day this month. I'll make a strong 6 figures, and I'm actually speaking in front of a group of voiceover actors. And I'm going to be teaching them how to better capitalize, monetize on their God-given gift, their ability to speak.
Oh, that's pretty cool. It's funny now. I'm like all conscious about my voice. I'm like, make sure I'm deep. But
You're amazing. You have nothing to worry about. You've got a great voice.
yeah, I was wondering, like, how much did you practice? Because I mean, sure, you started hypnotism when you were really young, but as far as practicing just speaking, how much did you practice? Because a lot of speakers, they think, okay, all I need is the presentation. I get up there, but how much did you really practice?
I rehearse, review, revise. And what I mean by that is every single presentation I do, I consider the rehearsal for the next presentation. And every single time I get on stage, I videotape for two reasons, legal reasons. A few years back, many years back now, thank you God, I got attacked by the Nevada Attorney General. And it was because one guy, another speaker actually, who was very jealous of my success and very jealous of my lifestyle, decided to make it his life's mission to make my life as miserable as possible. And he would burst into my seminar events with pre-filled out Attorney General complaint forms and throw them into the air and create ruckus. And at any rate, I videotape every single presentation I do because the whole basis of the attack was he claimed I had said one thing I had not said. And I couldn't defend because I didn't have a video of the presentation that he was talking about. And so these days I record every single presentation so that there's never a question of what I offered or what I said from the platform. And then the other reason is I review every single presentation. You know, I've been on stage 29 years now, and I still review every single, 45 years now, 29 years as a speaker, 45 years on stage, I still review my presentations. Because you're always looking for that little thing that you can adjust, little thing you can change that will tweak the presentation and make it more effective.
Okay. All right. That's perfect. And well, I got one more question. I'm sure you read a ton of books, and so I'm curious what's probably one of your favorite books that might not be too well known. So something like Think and Grow Rich is pretty well known, but what's something that's probably not too well known that you like?
The sequel to that book, actually, Outwitting the Devil.
Oh, okay. All right.
Napoleon Hill wrote the second book after Think and Grow Rich, a year after Think and Grow Rich came out. Obviously, Think and Grow Rich is the Bible for making money and for entrepreneurs. The second book wasn't released till after his wife's death because Napoleon talked about a lot of things that the wife feared would be too controversial, and she was really concerned that people wouldn't understand and that they would become, pariahs and be kicked out of their social circles. So that's a phenomenal book. I like reading biographies. I like reading stories about people who have succeeded in their fields and done it on their own, because the more you surround yourself with that kind of validation, the more you won't be able to give yourself excuses, and say, gosh, if I were smaller or taller or skinnier or a different color, or if my head grew hair, or if I was born into a richer family, or if I was a woman, or if I was a man, you let all those excuses aside and you say, you know what, this is the hand I was dealt. I'm going to play it extremely well, and I'm not going to make any excuses for failure. I'm just going to stay focused on my successes.
All right, cool. Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or even join your Turning Point program, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to go to sylver.com, SYLVER.com. And if they want to reach out to me personally, if they say, you know what, I'm interested in your speaking course, or I'm interested in attending Turning Point, my private email is elite, ELITE, at Sylver, SYLVER.com. Drop me an email. I answer every email that requires an answer. I answer them all personally, particularly people that are either speakers or wanting to develop their speaking career. That's what really excites me these days. And so when I saw your site, when you invited me to do this interview, I was excited to do it. I think you're doing a phenomenal job. I went through many of your posts, just great content. You are charismatic. You are stellar. Every review that I've ever gotten on people that have seen you perform have all been the same. You got to check this guy out. He's massively entertaining, just great charisma from the platform. And so it's always exciting to me when I see that there are people that are as concerned as I am in actually helping other people be better speakers, because I think that's where education is going. I think that scholastic education, the traditional route of going to college to get a better job, I think that its days are done. I really think that even now it doesn't work. and you've got people graduating from colleges with massive student loans and unable to get a job, when I think the best way to learn something is in a 2-day seminar course, or to find a mentor, somebody that is excellent at what they do, and figure out an arrangement, whether it's financial or whether it's service oriented, that the mentor would want to mentor somebody, because that's going to be the fastest way you're going to learn without all the the extra courses that you don't need in basket weaving or Latin or whatever it is you need to take in a traditional educational format to get your diploma.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, I appreciate you being on here. So thank you.